North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us today. We bring you the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. I point out both. I then make commentary which is not the news, just my opinion and fully debatable, which, strangely enough, brings us to debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. That's what you get from the Wells Report every single day, Monday through Friday, from 2 until 5 Central Time. Big day today in the news. U.S. Magistrate Bruce Reinhardt has set in motion the possible public release of a heavily redacted version of the affidavit for the search at Mar-a-Lago. The judge plans to hear more from the Justice Department by next week. He set the Justice Department on a mission to bring him more information about the affidavit and make possible redactions. Next Thursday, we'll be watching the story. It describes the investigative steps and methods leading to the need for the search. Magistrate Reinhardt said he wasn't convinced yet the entire affidavit should remain undisclosed to the public. Prosecutors will have the opportunity to propose redactions and explain why each piece of information needs to be kept from the public eye, said transparency. Earlier today, Reinhardt said he would unseal some other procedural filings that are currently under seal on the search warrant docket. According to the judge's comments, the filings are the Department of Justice's motion to seal the warrant documents, the order granting the sealing request, and the criminal cover sheet. So there you go. Jay Bratt, who's a top lawyer in the Department of Justice National Security Division, raised concerns about the risks the FBI has faced since the news of the Mar-a-Lago searches broke, with Bratt mentioning the recent standoff at the Cincinnati FBI field office and amateur sleuths on the internet. He told the judge that if any of the other documents are released, the DOJ would want to redact even background information about the agents who have worked on the matter so far. Bratt also laid out DOJ concerns that releasing the affidavit would have a chilling effect on future witnesses. He said during the hearing that several witnesses are already part of the investigation with some very specific relevant information that, if revealed, would reveal who they are. Now, yesterday, we discussed the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution of the United States on the Bill of Rights. And in nowhere in that Fourth Amendment does it state that there is protection from the investigative agency from people understanding where they're trying to go with their investigation. In this particular case, considering the checkered past of both the DOJ and the FBI, to leave that stuff undisclosed, in my view, points to something else we've been talking about for the last couple of days, which is the not so good news about a possible cover-up from the DOJ on this. There are big problems with this affidavit. There are big problems with this search, and they are only partially addressed today. Now, there are some things here that kind of rankle me. The idea that Jay Bratt, the top lawyer of the Justice Department's National Security Division, would say that if some of the documents were released, it would encourage amateur sleuths. That arrogance is completely uncalled for under these circumstances, especially in the context of what is easily a malfunctioning DOJ and FBI. There have been far too many huge errors, breaches of protocol, and general foolishnesses that would allow somebody like Jay Bratt to start complaining about amateur sleuths. If you have to ask me, the amateur sleuths involved in this are political operatives in the FBI. There's more about that coming up in just a couple of minutes. I'm not the only one that thinks this way. And we'll have that for you in just a little bit. Brett also laid out concerns that the release of the affidavit would have a chilling effect on future witnesses. Again, we've had way too many undisclosed identities of witnesses who said things based on the fact that they would be protected from scrutiny. If you're going to testify against a former president of the United States, you have to be held accountable for that testimony. It's certainly that way the other way around, as this two-tiered justice system continues to be placed in front of us, we the American people, under these circumstances. Now, once again, that's simply my opinion. It is debatable. By all means, debate. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. You can also reach us on the chat. We have a chat going, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Join us. I joined Telegram yesterday and found a lot of my friends already waiting for me. As a matter of fact, I got a couple of, hey, about time. And by the way, on the chat, Randy R. Randy is the winner of the chat room derby today. So there you go. Someone points out that witnesses should be protected. That is normal. Well, there's also something else that should be protected, and that is the concept that in the United States of America, we get to face our accusers. And that's something that is not being touched on, not being talked about, and it should be. Look, you don't get to bring, as I referred to it earlier, a checkered past of both DOJ interference in political campaigns under false pretenses. You don't get to caught manufacturing evidence and altering evidence for the sake of what was a dishonest attempt to spy on the Trump campaign. You don't get to bring that to this proceeding and say, hey, you know what? Everything has got to remain on the up and up. My overall overriding concern is transparency. That affidavit should be released. I find it ridiculous that it wouldn't be under these circumstances. The chilling effect that needs to be sent is not against witnesses. The chilling effect that needs to be sent is the chilling that you can play fast and loose with the rules of evidence, the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, and United States law for the sake of some kind of political vendetta. I've seen nothing here that takes me away from the assertion that A, it is a political exercise, and B, there's a cover-up going on. And all this does is reinforce that for me. How about for you? 817-379-2172. How about for you? And those people that once again just go blindly saying, you know what, this is the right thing. The judge did the right thing, doggone it, he did the right thing. Well, just remember that. Remember that when the baleful eye of overreaching secret police-style investigations touch your life. Because that's what's next. These precedents can't be set because they'll be used. This is a bad idea. It is absolutely unnecessary, in my view, to protect anyone involved in this mess, especially considering the Mueller investigation, especially considering all of the garbage that has been piled at the feet of the American people during the years of the Trump presidency. And in this sorry affair that is absolutely unprecedented. It's just unprecedented. That we have this in our country at this particular moment is awful. And we have to do something about it. We, the people, have to do something about it because it's plain, at least as plain as I'm concerned, that the law enforcement officials involved in all of this are playing politics. And they're not doing their jobs. And that, in my view, is awful. Our telephone number again, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. So this partial release is something that is okay, understandable, but it also once again calls to a mess. It calls to a mess. Let's get to the chat room here. Every time there's a headline like this, I wonder what they're diverting our attention away from. Well, there you go. Langston points out that you do get to face your accusers in court. Oh, yeah? I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case at all. And once again, the Fourth Amendment simply does not allow for the protection of witnesses. It doesn't allow for the protection of witnesses. That is a construct. It's a construct that has very little to do with the Bill of Rights, the Constitution of the United States. And you have to understand where the Fourth Amendment came from. Before the United States was the United States, the ruling British governors of this country would essentially make up their own warrants on the spot without being specific, without doing any of those things that are currently in the Fourth Amendment, specifying what is to be searched for and where it's supposed to be found. They would just make this stuff up on the they were open search warrants. They just go into your house and find anything, and if they found any law being broken, you got arrested. That's why we have a Fourth Amendment. Fishing expeditions are the reason. British fishing expeditions are the reason we have the Fourth Amendment. That's the spirit of the law. And I have absolutely no doubt that there would be an attempt at some point to protect the identities of the witnesses testifying, perhaps in a closed session of whatever trial might be coming up. And once again, it's a terrible precedent to set. A terrible precedent to set. It's simple. They found classified documents at Trump's home. Well, it's not that simple. And we've talked about that before. You keep lancing, you keep going back to stuff we've already covered. Those are facts. Well, okay, but there's more information on that I'm going to give you coming up in the next hour of the Wells Report that casts a pall over what you're saying there. Mueller investigated Trump communication with Russian operatives, but didn't find it. As a matter of fact, I covered that not exclusively, but I covered that comprehensively on the Wells Report. The entire time it was happening. Let's see. Since this is the magistrate that signed off on the warrant, of course, he's only releasing partial information. Once again, how could you draw any other conclusion? No, that's not what the Fourth Amendment's all about. Fourth Amendment was based on Adam Schiff's being confiscated because he smuggled goods. No, that's not what it's for. I told you what it was for. Are you paying attention at all? Let's see. There's a decent show called In Plain Sight centered around marshals and the Witness Protection Program. Okay, that's good to know. Let's see. Opening affidavits already have a precedent. They do. And this one was partially opened by Magistrate Bruce Reinhardt. Where will it go from here? Well, next Thursday we'll find out more. How much will be redacted? Again, we'll find out in a week. But still, I would be much happier if we simply had all the information required. And identities being held is something that has been abused in the past. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining the broadcast. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Allies of former President Donald Trump are urging him to publicly release surveillance footage of FBI agents executing a search warrant at his Mar-a-Lago residence. That proposal has drawn mixed reactions from inside his orbit, according to CNN. The CCTV footage has been so closely held that aides to the former president aren't sure if he has seen it in full himself. I don't think it's been shared by anyone outside of the attorneys. Yet, when asked earlier this week by Fox News' Sean Hannity whether the footage would be released, Trump's son Eric Trump said, "Absolutely, Sean, at the right time." Some of Trump's aides and allies have encouraged the former president to make some of the footage available to the public, believing it could send a jolt of energy through the Republican Party base. One person familiar with the conversations said there have been discussions about featuring the August footage in campaign-style ads, believing that footage could bolster Trump's claim of political persecution. Another person close to Trump said it's not a matter of if the former president and his team will release any of the footage, but when, noting it could be released before he makes a campaign announcement. Others in Trump's world have warned of potential risks to the former president if he does release the tapes. A second person close to Trump cautioned that releasing the footage could backfire by providing people with a visual understanding of the sheer volume of materials that federal agents seized from his oceanfront residence, including classified materials. I don't think that's a serious issue. The reason I don't think it's a serious issue goes right back to the search warrant itself. Any papers generated during the Trump administration, from the time he took office to the time he left office, was covered with that search warrant. It was overly broad. Why it got signed off on, only politics knows for sure. Hate to say it that way, but that's the way I see it. It's one thing to read a bunch of numbers on an inventory list. It's another to see law enforcement agents actually carrying a dozen plus boxes out of President Trump's home, knowing they probably contain sensitive documents. I don't see how that helps him, said this person, who spoke to CNN, again, under condition of anonymity. Trump could also spend the next several months simply raising the specter of releasing the footage to be used as a political weapon without ever actually doing so. CNN reached out to the FBI and Justice Department for comment. Federal prosecutors disclosed in recent days the investigation, quote, implicates highly classified materials and that their work continues on potentially toward criminal charges, unquote. While it is unclear exactly what the surveillance footage would show, Trump and his attorneys say they taped the August 8th search by federal investigators even after the agents asked them to turn off the security cameras. You know what interests me? Why would they ask them to turn off the security cameras? Why is that? Why would the FBI care one way or another? If they're doing the right thing, no big deal, right? And oh, by the way, you step into somebody's residence, you don't get to call all the shots that happens in that residence. You just don't. Like turning off security cameras. I have security cameras in this house. Would I turn them off? No. And hell no. Absolutely out of the question. You're listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. I sure do appreciate it. Now, Langston does bring up something that's pretty important here. That affidavit would expose the names of the investigators that would be taking part in the actual search. I can see that would be something that would be redacted. I could. But what we need to see here, what is important and essential in my view, is the establishment of probable cause. And I hope that Judge Reinhart, not that I have a whole lot of faith in his judgment at this particular moment, but I certainly hope that Magistrate Reinhart will say, okay, the intent here is to show the probable cause, and will leave intact any information in the affidavit that would allow us to draw those conclusions. We'll find out in a week. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. Thanks for joining the broadcast. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Chat room is going today. You are perfectly welcome to join us there. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Heard about this yesterday, and I found it absolutely shocking. So you might want to listen to this regarding these particular circumstances involving this search. This from Newsweek magazine. It is superb piece of journalism. It truly is. I'm really impressed with it. William M. Arkin wrote this for Newsweek. The FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago last Monday was specifically intended to recover Donald Trump's personal stash of hidden documents, according to two high-level intelligence officials. To justify the unprecedented raid on the former president's residence and protect the source who revealed the existence of the private hoard, agents went into Trump's residence on the pretext that they were seeking all government documents. This is the overly broad part of the search warrant. This, according to one official who has been involved in the investigation. But the true target was not nuclear materials. It wasn't some sort of attempt to work with the National Archives having to do with the Presidential Records Act. It had to do with a private stash of information, some of which has been characterized by the Trump team as being exculpatory regarding any campaign or presidential malfeasance while President Trump was in office. The true target was this private stash, according to these highly placed officials. The Justice Department officials feared that Donald Trump might use and weaponize, if you will. They collected everything that rightly belonged to the U.S. government, but the true target was this particular document stash. The President Trump had been collecting since his early administration, says the source. By the way, once again, here we go. The source is granted anonymity to discuss sensitive issues. The sought-after documents deal with a variety of intelligence matters of interest to the former president, according to the officials, including material that Trump apparently thought would exonerate him of any claims of Russian collusion in 2016 or any other election-related charges. When President Trump left the White House in January of 2021, many of the normal processes of transition were not followed, especially because the president would not admit that he had lost the election. Newsweek. That's bias. Or that he would be leaving office. As a result, we now know some of the 42 boxes of documents were shipped to Mar-a-Lago by mistake. Officials' papers under U.S. law, which the National Archives is supposed to take custody of and catalog. Once again, the General Services Administration packed up all this stuff and sent it to Mar-a-Lago. Over the past 18 months, the Trump camp and archives were engaged in a back and forth which resulted in the return of 15 boxes and some additional documents. As late as June 3rd, when officials from the FBI and the Justice Department visited Mar-a-Lago to serve a grand jury subpoena for specific documents, the negotiations were largely cordial. In other words, the president was cooperating. But in the course of the investigation, FBI and Justice became aware of this private collection of material. As Newsweek previously reported, a confidential human source revealed the former president was not planning to divulge that he had possession of some of his own documents and that he did not intend to return them. They're his documents. Now, granted, there is a claim that all documents belong to the National Archives. But let's get back to this particular stash of documents that would completely exonerate the president, in his view, of any kind of malfeasance regarding the election of 2016. If the president doesn't have them, then he's not able to use them. And I wonder how, and they're supposed to be as a part of this Presidential Records Act, there's supposed to be unfettered access by the president to his own papers. Somehow, we're now in a situation where we're expected to believe that taking these pieces of information is simply in accordance with the idea that the National Archives owns all these documents, which they do. But it's also a fancy way of getting around, say, for example, embarrassing paperwork the president has kept and probably classified by the people trying to keep them hidden that they were afraid he was going to release. Once again, all of this begins to add up to somebody's covering up something. I brought this up days ago. I can see no reason to change my thinking on it, and I'm looking for some. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to defend the President of the United States. I'm trying to defend the United States. I'm trying to defend the idea that going in and confiscating material that might make you look bad is a cover-up. And I can see no reason why this doesn't add to that thinking. Trump administration officials, including former National Security Advisor John Bolton, described how the president regularly tore pages out of intelligence reports or took away documents which interested him to the White House residence. Most of those documents had the potential to reveal U.S. intelligence sources and methods, as Newsweek reported. The president is not going to reveal anything that would reveal sources and methods. He just wouldn't do that. The Washington Post reported those documents dealt with nuclear weapons. Apparently not the case. People familiar with the investigation did not offer additional details, such as whether the documents being sought involved weapons belonging to the United States or any other nation. The thing about that is that would be on the search warrant as specific items to be searched for and their location, according to the Fourth Amendment. Two U.S. officials with direct knowledge of the situation told Newsweek that while some of the intelligence documents may have dealt with nuclear weapons, that was not the main focus. Donald Trump kept documents that interested him, one of those officials said. Sometimes Iranian or North Korean nukes, sometimes Ukraine or Russia, some foreign leaders. It wasn't the subject matter per se that was of interest to justice, as it was the fear that Trump might actually use the information, including for personal gain. Well, yeah, okay. What personal gain would that be? Would that be for money? Or would it be to prove that he has been harassed and he is the subject of a political vendetta? And if it is the latter, it's certainly not going to be the former. He's not going to sell he's not going to sell out the United States of America with classified documents. That is espionage. No, this is the personal gain they're talking about is to be able to tell a story that the American people would believe in a subsequent election, perhaps. Trump was particularly interested in matters related to the Russia hoax and the wrongdoings of the deep state, one former Trump official told Newsweek. I think he felt, and I agree, that these facts are facts that the American people need to know, which is why the official is talking in the first place. Once again, he's anonymous, and that discredits him as far as I'm concerned. The official says Trump may have been planning to use them as part of a 2024 run for the presidency. If he indeed is planning on doing that, yeah, that information would be required to be released to the people of the United States, especially where the deep state is concerned. High-level U.S. government officials explain it was not necessarily the classification level of the documents nor even their subject matter that investigators were focused on. All official documents, regardless of classification, are required to be returned to the archives under the Presidential Records Act. Surely the FBI was going about its business of retrieving everything. But it is accurate to think about what was retrieved at Mar-a-Lago as two distinctive sets of documents, those being openly sought under the Presidential Records Act and those that formed part of Donald Trump's personal and owned collection. What we're talking about here is not just documents the archives was seeking to fulfill the provisions of the act, said one of the officials. They're also after some number of documents they considered to be more sensitive, but also documents they felt the former president had no intention to return. The decision to search Mar-a-Lago was prompted by concern that documents might be moved as the negotiations dragged on, or that former President Trump might use them, revealing secrets or intelligence sources and methods, including agents on the U.S. payroll or other secrets, such as what was being intercepted electronically. When you consider the fact that the FISA court was dishonestly used as a pretext to spy on the presidential campaign and transition of Donald Trump, when you're talking about intercepted electronic information, you're now in a situation where, okay, that's evidence in a trial that has yet to be scheduled. The trial of FBI officials lying to the FISA court. Trump said that the FBI broke into his personal safe, one evidently located in his office or bedroom, a claim that the government has not confirmed. Two government sources agree the private cache was located separately from the storage room that contained the 11 sets of classified documents that were the bulk of what the FBI received. On Monday, the Justice Department returned 3 passports the FBI said it inadvertently seized in the search, a quasi-admission that a Trump safe might have been the specific target. Also on Monday, in a response to a filing with a Florida court by numerous news media organizations asking the affidavit that justified the search be made public, the Justice Department said releasing it would undermine ongoing law enforcement investigations that implicate national security. Now, at the beginning of all of this, I said, well, if you've got something on the president, it better be big, it better be real. Maybe this is what they're referring to. The affidavit, Justice said in their opposition to unsealing the affidavit, would reveal highly sensitive information about witnesses, including witnesses interviewed by the government, specific investigative techniques, and the information required by law to be kept under seal. What's interesting to me, it's not so much the witnesses' identifications that are being protected. It's how did those particular witnesses actually become witnesses? In other words, who's responsible for these people being inside the room with Donald Trump? Who's responsible for those people actually being there? The FBI was instrumental in an investigation about militia members attempting to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan. The entire thing was cobbled up by FBI agents. The whole thing was cobbled up by FBI agents. And those identities were indeed discussed in court because they were FBI personnel and informants that were being paid by the FBI to try to coerce these so-called militia members into the kidnapping of Gretchen Whitmer. The entire case blew up. Not something, by the way, that was reported widely in the mainstream media. Why? Well, because it starts to unravel the entire narrative, doesn't it? When it comes to the FBI being an impartial source of objective federal law enforcement. In layman's terms, by the way, the affidavit reveals human sources, witnesses, the possibility that specific investigative techniques, like, for example, co-opting members of the Trump staff, including information from the intelligence community about what they believe Donald Trump had, or about surveillance of Mar-a-Lago, which would be compromised. Well, first of all, once again, according to the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, the intelligence community should have been able to list those materials that they believed he had. It should be right there, and possibly in the affidavit. And these guys are worried about the fact that if indeed we find ourselves in a position where there are strange ideas about evidentiary things, where these witnesses came from, which, by the way, the FBI has a track record of doing, along with the DOJ, then, again, my cover-up scenario becomes more and more real with every day that passes. I know it's hard for people to understand that classification of documents was not the main concern per se, but then again, that's all we've heard for the last several days, that it was all about classified materials. It's Donald Trump's potential law-breaking that is the focus. That applies to the Records Act stuff. As for his private stash, I don't know what that material is. But Justice was alarmed that Trump was planning to keep his possession of it secret. Well, that's an assumption. He wasn't planning on giving it to the National Archives, but was his intent to keep it secret? I don't believe so. I don't believe so. Someone says, hey, wait a minute. You definitely give President Trump the benefit of the doubt. Yes, I do. As I give President Biden the benefit of the doubt. As I gave President Obama the benefit of the doubt. As I gave George W. Bush the benefit of the doubt. I have a long track record of keeping things fair and keeping things real. And this is what I'm doing here. Newsweek. I don't know why this isn't on the front page of every paper in the United States of America. This is a huge, huge story. Huge story. It continues. We'll finish that up in just a couple of moments. You're watching The Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. You are watching The Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Please call us with your comments. Join the chat room. Love to have you. See what's going on with the chat as we speak. Let's see. Yes, I do give President Trump the benefit of the doubt. Langston also asked, just where is the Durham report? Why do we need that? What's going on with that? Yeah, I've been trying to figure out what's been going on with that for a very long time, along with just about anybody else in America. Let's see. The whole thing stinks. Yeah, that comes from Nancy. I ended up with company documents I meant to return, brought them home to work when they became unnecessary. I never took them to records retention. My bad. Come raid me, FBI. Well, you know. Court proved the same FBI big shot in the Whitmer case is now in the D.C. field office as part of the Trump fiasco. That is also sadly true. He's also one of the guys that is working with the January 6th committee. Let's see what else. By the way, Gary points out that the Rangers lead in the bottom of the fifth, 7-2. Good. There's a big... Okay, yeah, there we go. All right, so we're talking baseball now. Let's talk a little bit more about how we find ourselves in this position. This is about deep state malfeasance. Senate Judiciary Ranking Member Chuck Grassley says whistleblower allegations reveal a deeply rooted political infection within the FBI. In an August 17th letter to FBI Director Christopher Wray, the Iowa Republican demanded an accounting for alleged political bias influencing high-level decisions and investigations, particularly out of the FBI's Washington, D.C. office. Quote, starting on May 31st, 2022, I've written 3 letters to you regarding political bias that has infected the FBI Washington field office, Grassley wrote. 2 of these letters provide specific and credible allegations based on numerous whistleblowers that have approached my office with information that one can only conclude is indicative of a deeply rooted political infection that has spread to investigations and investigative activities into former President Donald Trump and Hunter Biden. Grassley claims the FBI approved investigative activity into the Trump campaign with questionable predication, while also choosing to shut down investigative activity and sources, which include verified and verifiable information relating to Hunter Biden. Let's see if I can get a new extension on my warranty. Let's see what we got here. Wells Report. Hi, may I help you? Hello?
Hello, this is a telemarketing call from Frontier Communications. For information about our services, please contact us at 1-800-921-8101. Or if you would like to opt out of future calls, please press 4 now.
I can do that.
Please hold while we connect you to the next available agent.
I pressed 4 because it said to do that, please press 4, so I did. And then they wanted me to be connected to another agent. How nice. Yeah. We're going to be talking more about this Grassley circumstance regarding whistleblower information in the next hour of the Wells Report. Well, what's important to keep in mind is this. Here are the facts that we have. The FBI has played politics. The DOJ has played politics. Those political things are obvious. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that this A stops and B is used to find out just exactly what's going on regarding President Donald Trump and other people involved in the Trump administration. We have to find out these things. It's the only kind of protection we have against this kind of conduct. There are an awful lot of FBI agents that are absolutely disgusted with what they've seen their agency pull off in the last several years. I've had some of those agents on this radio show or on this broadcast. And we just happen to find ourselves in a position where, hey, if we don't get this fixed, it's going to keep happening. And sooner or later, for all these people that are finding some sort of, glee in the misfortunes surrounding the presidency of Donald Trump, it's only a matter of time. If we don't get this fixed, if Charles Grassley isn't able to be able to run this to earth thanks to FBI whistleblowers, it's still going to happen. And those disgusted members of the FBI are actually saying, okay, I've seen enough. And what they're doing is they're blowing those whistles. There's an awful lot more coming up. We're going to have this next hour. We're going to be continuing this. The deep state, alive and well in these United States of America. It should be chilling to all of us, regardless of your politics. If you're American, to have an out of control federal law enforcement agency doing the political bidding of a particular political party, whichever one it is, but this time it happens to be the Democrats. Notice I said this time. That should send shivers up and down your spine that just simply won't stop. I mean, that's what's happening to me. You're listening to the Wells Report. Thanks very much for being here. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of moments. Yep. More about this in a couple of seconds. Once again, thanks for joining us today. We'll be back in a second. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We bring you the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. I make commentary. That's not the news. Then we debate everything that I've just mentioned. Everything. Two ways to do that. Find us on the chat room at your nearest YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Twitch. I go to those chat rooms often. And what I'm trying to figure out just exactly how we can move this stuff forward, how we can fix some of the ills that have been foisted on us by politicians and the political ethos currently in Washington, D.C. We're trying to do that. We're also trying to get away from politics as much as we possibly can, but gosh, it's really tough. It really is. Politics has way too much to do with our lives in these United States. Senate Judiciary Ranking Member Chuck Grassley, a Republican from Iowa, he is a senator. He says whistleblower allegations reveal a deeply rooted political infection within the FBI. This, by the way, comes to us from Fox News. In an August 17th letter to FBI Director Christopher Wray, the Iowa Republican demanded an accounting for alleged political bias influencing high-level investigations, particularly out of the Washington, D.C. FBI office. Starting on May 31st, 2022, I've written 3 letters to you regarding political bias that has infected the FBI's Washington field office, Grassley wrote. 2 of those letters provided specific and credible allegations based on numerous whistleblowers that have approached my office with information that one can only conclude is indicative of a deeply rooted political infection that has spread to investigative activity into former President Donald Trump and President Biden's son, Hunter. Grassley claims the FBI approved investigative activity into the Trump campaign with questionable predication, which is another reason why the affidavit for the Mar-a-Lago search warrant must be made as public as possible. I don't want anybody to get hurt in that process. But once again, I'm very interested in finding out not necessarily who the witnesses actually were, but just exactly how they became placed in President Trump's inner circle. We know that while the Democrats were overtly trying to end the presidency and therefore the presidency of Donald Trump, and therefore disenfranchising millions upon millions of American voters, we also understand that the Republican Party did their best to sabotage the presidency of Donald Trump. So there's all kinds of miscreancy involved in all of this, not just by the Democrats, by the Republicans too. Even after numerous public statements and letters from the senior GOP and Senator, Grassley says the FBI has yet to refute the claims and says the agency's failures to address them is eroding public trust in the FBI. That is true. In a July 18th letter to Wray and Attorney General Merrick Garland, Grassley said FBI whistleblowers allege a pattern of political bias from high-ranking officials, including Assistant Special Agent in Charge Timothy Thibault. According to Grassley, the whistleblowers say the FBI and DOJ employees must follow strict, substantial, factual predication guidelines in order to open an investigation, and the Thibault did not follow those guidelines. Grassley stated the investigation predication into Trump's campaign regarding 2020 electors was based on news articles that relied on information from American Oversight, a liberal government watchdog. Grassley said the predication document, presented to the Attorney General and the FBI Director for final sign-off for a full investigation, included selective assertions and either removed or watered down material connected to politically biased sourcing. It's another one of these cherry-picked, edited material stories. Grassley said whistleblowers had indicated that Thibault and Richard Pilger, who served in the election crimes branch of the DOJ's public integrity section, were at the center of the ongoing investigation into Trump's campaign. Grassley wrote that he has previously investigated Pilger for misconduct. A former DOJ official tells Fox News that Senate Republicans are taking a hard look at much-needed structural changes to the FBI, and that Grassley's inquiry signals the first step in that process. Grassley is seeking a comprehensive organizational breakdown of the Washington field office to see how it's staffed and who's responsible for the units and squads within the office. As you are aware, Special Agent in Charge Tim Tybalt is not the only politically biased FBI agent at the Washington field office, Grassley writes. He added that the FBI answers to Congress and the American people. The Justice Department did not respond. The FBI confirmed it had received the letter, but had no additional comment. Once again, if they're right, why would they have no additional comment? Why? Why aren't we hearing from these people? I'm often heard to say that you don't have to sell the truth. But you can certainly obfuscate transparency for the sake of concealing it, can't you? Absolutely awful. On the subject of the Mar-a-Lago raid that plunged the country into a political media maelstrom as reports rained down, ranging from nuclear-related documents being sought to former presidents' passports being taken away, and the actual search itself trying to get a private stash of President Trump's own material. Republicans have denounced the raid. House Republicans in the Intelligence Committee held a press conference in the wake of the FBI actions. The Department of Justice has not responded to House Intelligence Committee Republicans' letters, not just Senate letters from Chuck Grassley, but also letters requesting a briefing on the unprecedented raid from Representative Mark Wayne Mullen, the Republican from Oklahoma. This according to Fox News. Mullen, a member of the House Intelligence Committee, spoke with Fox News over the phone, was asked if he had any insight on the raid that he could share. To be honest, I want to be very honest, we don't. It's the frustrating thing about it. The Oklahoma Senate candidate revealed that during the interview, as of Saturday, House Intelligence Republicans have not been briefed on the raid at all, and noted both DOJ and House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff have been silent so far toward Mullen and his GOP colleagues as they ask for a briefing. Yeah, if you can't beat them, stonewall. Mullen's office confirmed Wednesday that committee Republicans have not received a response to their letter. We've asked them to come in and brief the Republicans, said Mullen. We've asked the chairman, Adam Schiff, to either bring them in or subpoena them to come in. And they have been completely silent on this. Mullen said the DOJ and FBI can brief committee members for sure, but perhaps not the rest of Congress. The people on the Intelligence Committee do indeed have special clearances. Mullen said he was feeling frustrated over the situation. He and his committee colleagues have direct oversight over Christopher Wray and the FBI. There's nothing we don't have clearance for, noting the small membership of his committee due to the sensitive proceedings. The Oklahoma Senate candidate said he would not be surprised if President Biden didn't know about the raid, but did not see the White House not knowing about it. Mullen also pointed out to messaging coming out of the administration that shifted the White House from the White House not knowing about the raid to solely President Biden not knowing about it, which is, once again, an obfuscation that really needs no comment. In other words, President Biden is thinking about eggs or ice cream, or the fact that there's no such thing as egg-flavored ice cream. He's just wandering around waiting for someone to put a teleprompter in front of him and tell him to read. But not all the offstage instructions. Try not to read those, Mr. President. Be a good idea. The congressman also said every day the DOJ waits to brief the American people en masse, or Congress as a whole, even the Intel Committee, it looks worse and worse and worse on them, a point I have made on this broadcast. It's been 500 plus days since he's left office. Why was it all of a sudden an immediate national security risk? Because that would be the only reason for something of this magnitude to take place. It would be an immediate national security risk. I don't believe it is a national security risk. I believe it's a Democrat Party security risk. Mullen said the raid eroded much of the goodwill cultivated by the DOJ recently, and the fallout will take decades to repair. Another point that I've made on this broadcast. The Senate candidate also believes that this will move the needle in the 2022 midterms. I agree. Yes, in this right here, the agencies have overstepped. The agency has overstepped, and they have lit an absolute fire underneath the Republican Party. Even those that were kind of leaning off the trough, they're thinking maybe we should look for someone else. Not anymore. They are solid, rock solid. They see what's happening here. The Republican congressman also said government oversight is the reason behind him running for the Senate. The reason why I ran for the Senate to begin with was to hold these agencies like this accountable, said Mullen. It's frustrating to me because these agencies have been running so rogue that they haven't been accountable to Congress at all. The Senate has at least more direct oversight than Congress. A DOJ spokesman told Fox News Digital that the agency was reviewing the letter in its normal course. A spokesperson for the House Intelligence Committee told Fox News that Intelligence Committee majority is deeply concerned by indications that highly classified material was mishandled and sent a letter to the Director of National Intelligence asking that a damage assessment be conducted and the committee be briefed on the documents and assessments as soon as possible, a briefing that would be done on a bipartisan basis. You know what's interesting about that is what if they do an intelligence damage assessment and they find no damage? What about that? That's why I'm really not sure that we'll ever see that very investigation. That very damage assessment probably won't actually happen because they won't find anything. And then the whole thing, all the dominoes begin to fall. The majority has yet to receive a request from the committee Republicans regarding the documents and has a grave concern that public comments by the minority about the execution of a valid search warrant are only putting the safety of the FBI and other law enforcement personnel at risk. This according to the spokesperson. Nobody's putting their name on it. The committee will continue to exercise responsible oversight of this issue, particularly with respect to the possible disclosure or compromise of highly classified information by IC agencies. That's intelligence community. Attorney General Merrick Garland signed off on the controversial, unprecedented raid, with the FBI taking multiple boxes of documents from Trump's Florida residence. It's beginning to look more and more and more like what they wanted to do was get documents out of the possession of Donald Trump for political purposes. That's the way I see it. What do you believe? Give us a call. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. They overstepped in it. Yeah, they probably did. Yeah. Gail says we have to clean house. Yes, we do. And we have our first chance to do it coming up in 80 or so days. 80 or so days until what? I don't know. But I certainly hope that whatever happens, it's massive. Not from a violent standpoint, from a political one. Political parties simply are not doing the people's business. More about that coming up in just a couple of moments. Back with more of the Wells Report as we continue for a Thursday afternoon. Thanks for being here. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Thanks for joining us today. A lot of people are saying that they hope that the drop kick by Wyoming voters day before yesterday is the beginning of a red wave. We'll see. We will see. Let's see, gave a jump to a young family fresh from California. They escaped and are voting red. That's the trend of those escaping. Well, let's hope so. Please, by all means, keep your California out of my Texas. Please, by all means. So, one of the things that has to be pointed out here, after the Mar-a-Lago raid and after the public outcry and furor over it, is that many Republicans started defending Donald Trump. Far more Republicans defending Donald Trump than were doing it during his presidency. What's fascinating to me is that, had the Republican Party actually supported Donald Trump through all of this garbage, there would very likely have been no impeachments, especially after the Mueller report. There just wouldn't be, because the political cost would have been too high. Now, as is the Republican pattern, after the fact, or well before the actual fact, that's when Republicans are talking. They're spending an awful lot of time saying, by golly, when we get back to the House of Representatives, we're going to investigate all this stuff. Well, that's a ways in the future. We have to wait until after January for that to actually occur. And I'm still not convinced that we're going to see any of it. I hear a lot of brave talk by the Republican Party, but I really don't see an awful lot of brave action. But the fact that the Republican Party had just as much to lose by the swamp drainage presented by President Donald Trump as the Democrats did, that's why the Republican Party held President Trump at arm's reach, just at arm's length. Okay, well, we're on your side. Sure we are. Yeah. And now that we've got until 2024 for a presidential election, it's not a lead pipe cinch that Trump will even run, let alone actually get the Republican nomination. Perhaps they're banking on the fact that we'll forget. I don't believe we will. I do not believe we will. And that's something that we need to keep in mind. By the way, during all of this mess, we have seen that people who have supported Donald Trump are vilified. Anybody that voted for Donald Trump is, say, for example, a racist. Anybody that voted for Donald Trump is an extremist. Anybody that voted for Donald Trump is a domestic terrorist. Well, there is a former CIA director that is now upping the ante on those kinds of unfortunate pieces of rhetoric. I'll have that for you coming up in just a little bit. That's what I'm going to do here because we're unfolding a very weighty news day here on this Thursday. In case you do not know, Judge Bruce Reinhart in Florida said that indeed the affidavit could be released partially. And he's saying that the more transparency that can be put into the released and redacted affidavit, the more transparency that can be put in it, the better. What does that actually mean? I don't know. But if he's concerned about whether or not he's seen as playing politics, that cat's out of the bag. So what is he trying to get done? I don't know. We'll find out next Thursday. You're listening to the Wells Report. Back with more coming up in just a couple of moments. Stay right there. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. As men age, they tend to become more strident in their beliefs. And that can be difficult, if not outright dangerous, in the world of governance, as it is something that is not just it's not just a theory. It's an actual fact. This is measurable. And when you start thinking about the government is essentially run by older guys whose thought patterns change over time, it's possible that there can be statements made that are, shall we say, unhelpful. Former CIA Director Michael Hayden said yesterday he agreed with a British journalist's contention that Republicans were more nihilistic and dangerous than extremist groups and dictatorships around the world. I've covered extremism and violent ideologies around the world over my career, tweeted Financial Times columnist Edward Luce. This, by the way, from Fox News. Have never come across a political force more nihilistic, in other words, life is meaningless, dangerous, and contemptible than today's Republicans. Nothing close. Among those who agreed with Luce's contention was former CIA Director Michael Hayden, who tweeted, "I agree, and I was the CIA director." Jeff Gisea, an entrepreneur and self-declared former Trump supporter, questioned the productivity of such a comment, noting that it would only reinforce the GOP narrative of a partisan, weaponized intelligence apparatus. Yeah, like that's not something that's widely known or even expected at this point. Respectfully, what are you trying to accomplish with this message, Director Hayden? I understand your concerns, but this type of message reinforces the prevailing GOP narrative of a partisan, weaponized intelligence apparatus. Further, your message overstates the case. Do you really believe that the GOP is more nihilistic and contemptible than Al-Qaeda? Than ISIS? Seriously? Make that case. That's a very good thing to say. Just exactly what's the point here? I think that Director Hayden is past his prime. I think it's about time. It's about time to say, for example, I don't know, maybe spend more time with really good scotch and wonderful Cuban cigars than talking in front of a microphone, sir. Respectfully. Good heavens. The United States of America is investing millions upon millions to stop gun death. Why isn't it actually working? This from USA Today. We know that we know what feeds gun violence: poverty, food, housing insecurity, exposure to shootings, and more. So why aren't we getting resources to the people who need them the most? Gun deaths in the U.S. reached all-time highs amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Most of those were suicides. And firearms are now the leading cause of death among children and teens. Well, that's because children and teens very rarely die. In response, more cities are investing federal dollars in local programs to curtail shootings, but a new report finds many are failing to address the root causes in the most affected communities. Community Justice Action Fund, a left-leaning nonprofit led by people of color, compiled what it calls a first-of-its-kind index and scorecard to assess how cities allocate funding to violence prevention programs. The report focused on the 50 U.S. cities with the highest rates of shootings in the U.S. last year. The Biden administration claims to have secured at least $300 million for community violence prevention and intervention programs, such as job programs and substance use and mental health services. Though the 2021 American Rescue Plan Act and 2020 Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. In late July, President Joe Biden announced his Safer America Plan, which would contribute $5 billion more to such interventions over the next 10 years. More than half of the cities, 64% in the report, have invested in this specific model of gun violence prevention, also known as street violence intervention. The programs rely on credible messengers who mediate conflicts in their communities and connect with people with services, mental health services, and so on. Nearly half of the cities have invested in mental health crisis response programs that send unarmed first responders who have mental health expertise. Most programs are pilot projects where mental health professionals co-respond to 9/11 calls involving behavioral or mental health crises. Offices of Violence Prevention. Less than half the cities, 38%, have invested in a comprehensive public health approach to violence prevention. And less than half, 21 cities, have offices of violence prevention. While most cities direct funding to programs and strategies that aim to address the root cause of violence, such as areas of housing and food insecurity, employment, education, health, and firearms regulations, the report found that most programs do not prioritize communities that experience the highest level of violence. For example, a small fraction of the cities, 6%, funded housing and food assistance program that specifically targeted neighborhoods most impacted by violence. Where's the money going? 10% of the cities funded organizations that provide long-term trauma-informed behavior and mental health care for people most at risk of violence. About a quarter of the cities invested in workforce development programs for people known to be at high risk for engaging in or experiencing violence. We also found that none of the 50 rated cities have a discernible strategy to address the dearth of trauma care facilities in or near communities that experience the highest level of gun violence. Greg Jackson, a gun violence survivor and executive director of the Community Justice Action Fund, said it's essential that cities narrowly tailor programs and services to the people and communities that most need the resources. What I would suggest personally is the following. Maybe this isn't the way to handle crime. Maybe this isn't the way to handle violence. Maybe what we should do is we should stop sending social workers out to do police officers' work. Oh, but then again, we have to keep rolling back. We have to keep rolling back funding for police forces. The reason that we have violence in America is because, first of all, it was egged on during the summer of 2020. This is my opinion. What we have done in this nation, and we did running up to the 2020 election, was reinforce an aggrieved society, an aggrieved faction of society that was being oppressed by the rest of society. An entire summer went by, and we did not see anything close to the level of law enforcement that we saw for the 8 people that were arrested and remain in solitary confinement in the nation's capital during the January 6th riot. So what we did was we said, go do what you want. In those cities, add prosecutors who say, well, the real problem with crime in our city is the justice system. No, the real problem with crime in your city is the fact that you keep taking police officers off the street and you keep empowering people who commit violence. No cash bail, anyone? Anybody remember that? It's turned into a fiasco. What you do is you don't send out a social worker to do a police officer's job. You send a police officer out there. All police officers now routinely wear body cameras. They can't turn them off. And they shouldn't. And while there are egregious abuses by police of the citizenry, they are few and far between and minuscule. But this is where politics begins to poison even the most basic parts of our society. They wanted to frame President Trump as a racist. And therefore, anything that happened having to do with what was going on in the nation was because of President Trump's racist policies. And the empowerment of this aggrieved portion of society resulted in unbelievable violence, billions of dollars of property loss, lost lives, and all manner of things that still have not been adequately explained by the people who are doing the egging on. And so now, well, you go out and shoot somebody, you're not going to get into trouble. They won't even ask you to pay a substantial amount of money in bail. They'll just cut you loose. And they're wondering why violence has escalated in all these cities? No, what you don't need people to try to mitigate violent people from committing violence in, say, for example, neighborhoods. The best way to do that is a police car with 2 police officers in it. Police car with a radio that is in constant communication with the dispatcher. And if indeed something bad happens, somebody needs to show up and help out the police officers on scene. Those people that walk up to a police officer, shoot them in the side of the head as he's sitting in his car watching the neighborhood, those people should be tried, and if found guilty, they should be sentenced to death. They should have one appeal, and following that appeal, if it indeed is lost, a death warrant shall be issued, and they shall be put to death in about, 180 days. It should be swift. It should be fast. But once again, these people decrying the fact that there's violence in the streets and so on and so forth, they're also against the death penalty. So once again, we see this matrix of irresponsible societal management that has led to where we are right this very moment. And the people that are responsible not only refuse to take responsibility. They've backed themselves into a corner by saying police are bad, or police are bad. Here's a social worker. It doesn't work. It's an absurd idea to begin with, but now it's been down the road for a while. Now we actually see the fruits of that labor. And my gosh, violence it's still happening. We sent a social worker. We had a justice mediator go talk to him. It's really amazing. When someone is willing to pick up a gun and do whatever they feel is necessary, it's really, really hard to reason with people like that. It's hard to get into their fragile psyches. Hard to get into their fragile psyches and find out just exactly what caused these violent tendencies. In other words, law enforcement is not an encounter group. Now, do those people need exposure to all these things? Absolutely. Do a lot of these people have serious mental illness? Yes. Does an even greater number have not necessarily mental illness, but self-programmed or extra self-programming that causes them to be violent? That's between them and their psychologist or their psychiatrist. It is not the responsibility of a municipality of any kind whatsoever to try to assuage the violent tendencies of people in their communities. That's not their job. Their job is not to get to the psychology of the thing. Their job is to get those people off the streets. And depending on the level of violence, keep them off the streets. In the very first process, you've been arrested. Well, now you have to come up with bail. It's going to cost you a lot of money. If you do something incredibly stupid, the bail could be as much as $100,000 or more, which means that you'll pay a bail bondsman $10,000. But if there's zero cash bail, what's the incentive to stop? Especially when you have a leftist district attorney who's just going to cut you loose anyway. And then what happens? Well, more people buy weapons to defend themselves because they're not being defended by the police, because the police have been defunded in favor of social workers and violence mediators. strategies that don't work. Put the money in the police officers. Instead of hiring social workers, hire police officers to enforce the law. If you want these people to see social workers, I'm all for that. I think that's a fine plan. But don't take money out of the police officer's budget. The police department budget, don't take money out of there to do those things. That's ridiculous. You'll have to find money elsewhere. You'll have to find another way of doing it. And may I suggest more cops on the street more often and respectfully engage with the community and vice versa. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. You can find us on chat, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. Please, by all means, give us a buzz. We're looking forward to hearing from you. By the way, while you're watching this broadcast, if you find any value in it, please, by all means, share it with your friends. Hit a like every now and then and subscribe. Subscribe to the broadcast. We're here every single day between 2 and 5 live on Facebook, YouTube, and a lot of other places. We would love to have you. Also, by the way, you can, as you can see on the crawl down below my very handsome face. God, I can't believe I said that. A way to go to Patreon, Patreon, and contribute to the Wells Report. Go to www.patreon, patreon.com/The Wells Report. Take a look. Tell me what you think. So we were just talking about crime in big cities and the way they're trying to do something about it, and how I believe their failings are now making themselves readily apparent. I'm not the only one. Fox News has done some work on defunding the police and the politicians responsible and the crime in the areas they represent that have escalated dramatically because of it. Even with Big Apple murder rates similar to this year compared to last, other major crimes have surged, according to police statistics. Polls are finding that New Yorkers are fed up. They absolutely are. The Big Apple has become the rotten apple. Democrat New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been one of the most vocal and high-profile lawmakers to demand the defunding and dismantling of American police departments, including in her own district, where major crime has climbed steadily over the past 2 years. When former New York Mayor Bill de Blasio proposed slashing the NYPD budget by $1 billion in 2020, AOC called it a disingenuous illusion and doubled down. Defunding the police means defunding the police, she said at the time. It does not mean budget tricks or funny math. It doesn't mean moving school police officers from NYPD budget to the Department of Education budget so the exact same police remained in schools. But public safety costs money, according to experts. Residents are concerned for their own welfare. When you don't have the funding to put enough people in your detective bureau to investigate and clear those serious crimes like homicide, of course, your clearance rate is going to be abysmal, said Betsy Brantner Smith, a retired police sergeant and spokesperson for the National Police Association. Also, look at programs like community policing. The better relationship you have with your community as a police department, the more info you're going to be able to get out of your citizens when it comes to serious crime. According to Brantner Smith, the progressive narrative that police officers are terrorizing minority communities is a dangerous myth. The NYPD in particular has a majority of its rosters made up of minority officers. Her safety's never in jeopardy, but all those crime victims in her district, they have to worry about their safety. If all these defund the police politicians had to walk the same streets as their constituents, they'd be singing a very different tune, but they do not. The homicide rate in New York has remained relatively flat over the past 2 years, but after the slayings of George Floyd in Minneapolis, fueling a national defund the police campaign, which, by the way, Ocasio-Cortez endorsed, NYPD statistics show a dramatic increase in other crimes. According to Paul Morrow, an attorney and former NYPD inspector, key major crimes to watch are robberies and burglaries, highly invasive profit-motivated crimes that often involve repeat offenders. Particularly robberies, as robbery is essentially larceny plus violence. Rising robbery numbers are very detrimental to a sense of street safety. Someone is taking your stuff. They're willing to hurt you to do it, and they're doing it right on the streets in your neighborhood. We got more about that coming up in just a couple of moments. Citywide crime statistics show that major crimes have increased by more than 36.64%. This is so far this year over 2021 and increased another 37.35% since 2020. Robberies and burglaries. Morrow's bellwethers climbed by 39% and 32%, respectively. It's not working. It's not working. In precincts that have police portions of Ocasio-Cortez middle and working class district, the numbers have also increased. In the NYPD 43rd precinct covering the Southeast Bronx, robberies soared 70% between the start of the year and August 7th, the most recent date for which statistics are available. Burglaries were up more than 30% to the north to the 45th precinct. Robberies were up more than 12% this year compared to last year, but more than double the 2020 total. In the 49th precinct, robberies also climbed, but burglaries were down significantly, 20% lower in 2021, almost 30% lower than in 2020. And on and on. Look, here's the situation. You can have all the highfalutin ideologies you want to, but it's not working. It's simply not working. So what are you going to do? Are you going to just double down, toe the line, keep getting your constituents robbed, raped, murdered? Or are you going to say, boy, you know, that defund the police idea sure sounded good in a politician's brain, but sure didn't work at all on the street? Yeah, these are things we have to fix. We have an election coming up. Let's cross your fingers and hope that we actually make some good decisions in the voting booth. We'll see you in just a couple of minutes for hour number 3 on the Wells Report. Thanks very much, everybody. I'll be right back. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. What do we do on this broadcast? We bring you the news, the real news. We analyze the news for fact and bias, and we point out both. We then make commentary, which is not the news. No, commentary is debatable, which brings us to debate. By all means, take part in this broadcast. It's interactive. We'd love to hear from you. You can do that by doing two things. You can either call me on the telephone at 817-379-2172. Or what you can do is you can also join our chat room. It's been flying today. It's been good. I interact with the chat all the time. Let's see. What do we got here? We'll get to that coming up in just a couple of moments. But we sure do appreciate people in the chat. Thank you. We're talking a little bit about a very good example of how liberal policies in big cities are screwing things up like artwork. Chelsea is an upscale portion of New York. Their residents are saying that drug users are taking over their neighborhood. It's an upscale place. It no longer is. There are people in Portland, Oregon right now selling their houses to get away from the fact that homeless encroachments have been made into their neighborhoods. Kids are walking to school past all kinds of just awful behavior. Some of New York residents are complaining their once chic and upscale neighborhood has been overwhelmed, that's Chelsea, have been overwhelmed by an influx of drugs and other obscenities that law enforcement has been unable to control. In Manhattan's Chelsea neighborhood, once known for its voguish condominiums and ritzy restaurants, drug users have begun openly using syringes in the streets, which are also permeated with violence, nudity, smoking, sex dens. This according to Fox 5 News. What's worse, it's not just at night, it's during the day, said Vivek Batra, a co-op owner in the neighborhood that told Fox 5, quote, "You can see people over here shooting up and smoking. I find pipes. I find needles in the streets. The kids are playing right there." A Fox 5 News crew also recorded a person injecting a syringe into their arm in a basement laundry room and another individual openly smoking what police said was probably methadone. Or it's not methadone, but methamphetamine. These are not isolated incidents. Residents told the station as parents and said the neighborhood is now an area not safe for kids. We have people going around the block for the past 3 years taking drugs, having sex in the basements, breaking in, different types of intrusions. People in San Francisco are essentially leaving their cars open. Take whatever you want to, but don't destroy my car. Problem with it is they open up the car, they find out that there's nothing in it, and they destroy the car. People are leaving in droves. New York and California are losing seats in Congress, as they should. People are voting with their feet. The police can't keep up with a rampant crime despite their best efforts, according to residents. We've been using the 311 app, which is great. We call the police. The police is very responsive. We've had 2 break-ins. They were able to arrest the people within hours, said Chloe. The issue is we're seeing that in a lot of cases, they're not able to detain the person. So sometimes they're not able to do the arrest that we need them to do. Even when police do catch the suspected criminal and an arrest is made, the New York Police Department cannot keep the individual behind bars. This according to NYPD Captain Robert Galt. Galt told Fox 5 News New York that arrests and narcotics arrests were up over the year, but the criminals were brought in and then released back on the street because of changing bail laws. Listen to this. This is a quote. "Our patrol arrests are up 37% right now year to date. When you look at the narcotics arrests, we're also at a 37% increase year to date as well. So we're arresting the individuals, we're bringing them in, but what we're seeing, unfortunately, is they're right back out there and the addiction doesn't go away. The criminal justice revolving door process of being arrested then released can be completed within minutes, according to the report. The police are trying to do their bit, and they said their hands are tied. Basically, all they can do is arrest them, write out a report, and they're out in minutes to be back out there doing whatever they've been doing all over again. The villainy no longer has a legal limit, said the police chief, sharing an example of a female suspect his department has arrested 151 times. You mentioned the elementary school on 21st Street. My people were out there today. They arrested a recidivist. That's somebody who's been in jail, gone back to jail, get released, and goes back to jail. The recidivist had a lengthy criminal history. They brought her in. This is an individual. She was in possession. She was observed smoking crystal meth under the scaffolding next to a school. She was brought in as per the law. She qualified for a desk appearance ticket. She was right back out on the station a couple of hours later. The situation has been described as catch, release, repeat. That's New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who has expressed his own frustration with the problem. And when it's not blatant crime happening in the streets, Fox 5 News New York reports another concern for residents is physical threats and intimidation. Lori's a bartender, resident of the year for 44, or the area rather, for 44 years. She told the outlet she would be unable to get to her home after working all night because of drug users sitting on her doorstep. I would come home between 4 and 5 in the morning, and they would be on my front stoop. I would be horrified. How am I going to get upstairs? She said. They're doing drugs. They were tweaking. They were shooting up their toes and smoking crack. The co-op owner shared a similar account, saying he was threatened just last week by a person with a knife. They get aggressive and say, we'll cut you. We've got a knife. I had someone pull a knife on me last week, Batra said. I was gardening there, and I tried to chase somebody away who was urinating on a car. And this person pulled a knife on me. I had to call police and back away. Residents who once cherished the area have been forced to endure the crime way or have moved away. While we're on that subject, kids, crime, craziness, New York City has had a series of random or unprovoked attacks on children, including some of the Big Apple's most affluent neighborhoods as police and parents prepare to send children back to school early next month. Kids have fallen victim to such attacks on New York City streets as recently as last week. 3 unsuspecting preteens were punched and shoved while they were in the celeb-frequented Greenwich Village. This is according to multiple news reports. The number of victims under 18 has increased 34% year to date compared to 2021, according to statistics. According to data provided by the New York Police Department, 117 victims were under 18 were shot as of August 14th as of October 14th this year, up from 87 kids and teenagers shot in the same time frame in 2021. But experts warn against the notion of any trend toward assaults on children. Murders and shootings citywide involving victims of all ages is actually down year to date as of August 14th, while felony assaults are up by 19%. This isn't working. It's actually getting worse. Once again, the criminals, the miscreants, the ne'er-do-wells, no relation. See, I'm John David Wells, never mind. These people are just out there ruling the streets. They have more rights than the people that they are victimizing. All because of liberal policy. Now, once again, you know how much I respect people's votes. One of the things about a free society based on a republic is that you do get the government you deserve. A 12-year-old girl was in the area of Washington and West 11th Street. Shortly after 5 p.m. August 9th, a 34-year-old Rodney Perry randomly punched her in the face. She suffered a minor injury, but was otherwise okay. Sure she was. Perry was charged with assault, though it was not clear at the time if he was released as part of the state's bail reform laws. Greenwich Village, also home to New York University and the school's main campus, has boasted wealthy residents, movie stars, other Hollywood A-listers, including Taylor Swift, Alec Baldwin, Seth Meyers, Hilary Swank, and disgraced filmmaker Harvey Weinstein, and then-wife Georgina Chapman, a fashion designer. Homes in the neighborhood are listed for a median price of $1.4 million. They sell for a median price of $1.5 million, according to Realtor.com. That's not going to last. A 6-year-old girl was riding her Razor scooter through Brooklyn's pricey Williamsburg neighborhood, an area that boasts homes with a median value of $1.4 million, according to Realtor.com. According to authorities, a trio of violent thieves targeted the girl on the evening of July 28th. One of the three suspects allegedly punched her in the chest while others stole the scooter. The male suspects then fled. The victim received medical treatment at the scene. Police later released surveillance footage of the suspects, who are believed to have been between the ages of 14 and 16. Meanwhile, a 9-year-old girl who was visiting from Miami in March was randomly sucker punched while walking near Central Park in the Plaza, Manhattan's historic hotel. This, according to multiple reports in A Good Samaritan. Rahim Ramsaran, 27 years of age, was allegedly spotted screaming at people before he carried out his unprovoked attack on the young girl, said doorman Neil Johnson, who intervened to help. Ramsaran reportedly punched the girl in the head near the intersection of Central Park South and Grand Army Plaza just before 11:30 a.m. March 21st, broad daylight, at which point Johnson, who worked at the plaza, stepped in. I heard a guy screaming. Then I heard a woman screaming. I ran towards Central Park South. There was a man that was walking away very fast towards a woman with a baby carriage and a little girl. Little girl was crying. The woman was screaming. When you hear a woman screaming and you see the visual of a woman with a baby carriage and a little girl running away screaming from a guy, you got to help. The young victim was treated at the scene, did not require further medical attention. Ramsaran was arrested minutes after the alleged attack. Is he back on the street? Probably. In February, 34-year-old Babakar Mbaye was arrested for randomly attacking a 4-year-old boy, punching the unsuspecting child in the head in bustling Times Square. Mbaye was charged with assault, endangering the welfare of a child, and resisting arrest for the alleged February 17th attack. According to the New York Post, he admitted to prosecutors that he drank a bottle of sanitizer before the assault. His defense attorney argued in court shortly after his arrest that Mbaye was under the influence of an intoxicating, debilitating psychiatric episode. And he's on the street, and probably is still on the street as you hear this. Speaking to Fox News Digital, a retired NYPD detective sergeant said the city is often grappling with offenders who are mentally ill, and whether mental health is at play, the suspects or the type of events often share similarities. People who do this stuff, mentally ill or not, are always seeking out the most vulnerable. And those are usually the very young and the very old. This is from Joseph Giacalone, who now works as an adjunct professor at New York City's John Jay College of Criminal Justice. He noted the issue of children as victims was difficult to define and varied based of the circumstances of each instance. Based on. Yeah. So welcome to the liberal government paradise. LA's got similar stories. Chicago, Portland, Seattle, all these big city liberal cities. And people are leaving because their children are getting their butts kicked. And you still want to vote for Democrats? Is that what you still want to do? This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. So what are people saying about stuff like this? What are people saying about these endless reports of failed liberal governmental policies? President and CEO Mark Smith of Smith & Wesson made this statement, quote, "A number of politicians and their lobbying partners in the media have recently sought to disparage Smith & Wesson. Some have had the audacity to suggest that after they have vilified, undermined, and defunded law enforcement for years, supported prosecutors who refuse to hold criminals accountable for their actions, overseen the decay of our country's mental health infrastructure, and generally promoted a culture of lawlessness, Smith & Wesson and other firearms manufacturers are somehow responsible for the crime wave that has predictably resulted from these destructive policies. But they are the ones to blame for the surge in violence and lawlessness, and they seek to avoid any responsibility for the crisis of violence they have created by attempting to shift the blame to Smith & Wesson and other firearms manufacturers and law-abiding gun owners. It's no surprise the cities suffering most from violent crimes are in the very same cities that have promoted irresponsible, soft-on-crime policies that often treat criminals as victims and victims as criminals. Many of these same cities also maintain the strictest gun laws in the nation, but rather than confront the failure of their policies, certain politicians have sought more laws restricting Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens, while simultaneously continuing to undermine our institutions of law and order. And to suppress the truth, some now seek to prohibit firearms manufacturers and supporters of the Second Amendment from advertising their products in a manner designed to remind law-abiding citizens that they have a constitutional right to bear arms in defense of themselves and their families. To be clear, a Smith & Wesson firearm has never broken into a home. A Smith & Wesson firearm has never assaulted a woman out for a late-night run in the city. A Smith & Wesson firearm has never carjacked an unsuspecting driver stopped at a traffic light. Instead, Smith & Wesson provides these citizens with a means to protect themselves and their families. We are proud of our 170-year history. We're proud of the commitment our employees are in making a quality product. We are proud to provide law-abiding citizens and law enforcement, our customers, with the tools to provide for their security and independence. We are proud of our responsible business practices. We will continue to work alongside law enforcement, community leaders, and lawmakers who are genuinely interested in creating safe neighborhoods. We will engage those who genuinely seek productive discussions, not as a means for scoring political points. We will continue to inform law-abiding citizens that they have a constitutionally protected right to defend themselves and their families. We will never back down in our defense of the Second Amendment. Smith & Wesson, empowering Americans. After that statement, blaming politicians for the surge in gun violence, CNBC reports that CEO Mark Smith is facing new backlash after he refused to testify at a House hearing alongside fellow top executives of other weapons makers. Smith said on Monday his company will never back down in our defense of the Second Amendment, also accused politicians and news media for the surge in gun violence happening across the country. The NRA, the nation's leading pro-gun group, posted the statement in full on its website. Oversight Committee Chair Representative Carolyn Maloney of New York, she's a Democrat, pushed back on his remarks in a statement to CNBC, accusing him of seeking to protect the company's profits. No, he's protecting the company's mission to provide us with the tools to defend ourselves. As these very same politicians, provide the tools to criminals to victimize ourselves. How could you possibly listen to that statement? How could you possibly listen to that statement and then have backlash against it? It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. You are listening to the Wells Report. I am John David Wells. We will be back coming up in just a couple of moments. You stay right there. Lots more to discuss on the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. I am John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us today. We sincerely appreciate it. From USA Today comes this. Nick Penzenstadler and Amritpal Kaur Sandhu Longoria. Got to practice these names. Taurus Pistols promises to win the fight with home intruders. Benelli tactical shotguns are ready to defend Iraq, Afghanistan, and your living room. And you might consider buying Wilson Combat's $2,500 Urban Super Sniper rifle that is so precise. Its .223 caliber rounds can hit within an inch at 100 yards. That, by the way, is called 1 minute of angle. And that's common among lots and lots and lots of rifles, including, by the way, your Ruger 1022 sport rifle. A USA Today review of thousands of gun company magazine advertisements spanning decades shows a gradual marketing shift from guns as tools for hunting to guns as necessities to protect your home and your family. The sea change, the moment of self-defense came to dominate, has been pegged by researchers at about 2011. 2 years after President Barack Obama took office with a platform that included gun control. That shift is driving efforts to slow a different trend. Annual gun sales peaked during the coronavirus pandemic, with more than 21.5 million weapons sold in 2022. Make that 2020. Another 19 million were sold last year, the second highest ever recorded. Why? Well, you can blame defund the police. Who's going to defend you if not you? Answer that question, please. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Please, by all means. That's a nice rifle, by the way, in case you're wondering. The Wilson Combat rifle I was just talking about, nice rifle. You don't have to spend that much money to have that kind of accuracy. That was my point. You know, you don't have to buy a $2,500 rifle to hit within an inch at 100 yards. You just don't. The shift is driving efforts to slow a different trend. Annual gun sales peaked, as I said. Democrats and advocates seeking to address gun violence argue that owning a gun does not make your home safer, a case for false advertising, and that marketing offensive tactical operations with military-grade weapons constitutes unlawful use of the product. They're not military-grade weapons. Military-grade weapons have capacities that non-military grade weapons do not have. In fact, it is illegal to possess military grade weapons because they fire fully automatic. I know. Just as Joe Camel and the Marlboro Man became flashpoints for a crackdown on cigarette ads in the 1990s, a handful of images are dominating the national debate. Among them is a series of ads from Remington about a combat-style AR rifle for, quote, the infinite number of extreme scenarios you will face in the world, in worlds of law enforcement or personal defense. Every police officer you know has at least one AR-15, at least one, and that does not count their personally owned weapons. Seeing an opening, gun control advocates have filed a series of complaints and petitions with who? Why, the Federal Trade Commission. And they say, by the way, USA Today reports the Federal Trade Commission as an independent agency charged with protecting consumers from unfair or deceptive marketing. None of these weapons have ever broken into a house. None of these weapons have ever carjacked someone. None of these weapons have ever unilaterally robbed a bank or robbed someone walking down the street. It's the people carrying them, and not the law-abiding ones, the law-ignoring ones. To somehow believe that putting more regulations out in the public sphere of law-abiding citizens to try to inhibit their purchase of the weapons they must use to defend themselves in these United States at this particular time, to believe somehow that is unreasonable or violates, oh, by the way, some sort of sense of decency with regard to advertising is absolutely patently ridiculous. Just my opinion. In Congress, Democrats are seeking action against gun marketing too, with a bill aimed at a crackdown on and the top oversight committee has been hounding firearms manufacturers for details of their advertising and sales. No. I'm sorry, no. And by the way, the Federal Trade Commission, that's an executive branch agency. That's not an independent agency. That's an executive branch agency like the EPA. And it's been weaponized. It's an executive branch agency like the IRS. And it's been weaponized. Now they're trying to weaponize the Federal Trade Commission for the sake of their political dream of only people who ignore laws being armed and able to do whatever they choose. The messages use fear to suggest that everybody needs a firearm to defend themselves and their property. This, according to Dave Puccino, Deputy Chief Counsel at Giffords, the gun control group founded by former Representative Gabby Giffords. Puccino maintains that's a lie. All public health research shows you're less safe. Your own family is more likely to be the victim, said Puccino. He pointed to the recent $73 million settlement over gun advertisements in the wake of the Sandy Hook shooting as evidence as the dam is breaking in the gun ad space. In their petition with the FTC, the coalition of Giffords, gun safety group Brady, and March for Our Lives pointed to studies showing cohabitants of handgun owners were 7 times more likely than adults in gun-free homes to be killed by a spouse, and 3.4 times more likely to be the victim of unintentional shootings, a figure that rises even higher for children. They point to the FTC's recent orders against the CBD industry, vaping products, and various purported COVID-19 remedies as evidence the Commission can intervene when manufacturers don't accurately convey public health risks of their products. 3 of the Commission's 5 current members are Democrats. What a surprise. I'm sorry, I've just never seen anybody whatsoever holding up a bag of CBD candy. No, they use guns. Let's see, vaping products. When was the last time you saw a vape used in a burglary or in a holdup? This is my vape. There are many like it, but this one is mine. Give me everything in your pockets right this very minute, or I'll blow my steam at you. That's not what they do. They pull out knives. They knock you on the ground. They take your stuff. And they're doing it with children. What's deceptive in all of this isn't the advertising for those weapons. What's deceptive in all of this is the gobbledygook where people will point at studies as if they have something to do with the reality of walking down the street and getting stabbed or shot or attacked or robbed or any of those things. The people that are doing those studies, they're probably in a nice, secure facility. Absolutely, disgustingly disconnected with simple reality in this, the defund the police era of American life. Also from USA Today, Democrats and gun safety groups have seized on a series of gun advertisements over the last several years they say represent unfair and deceptive marketing. The Federal Trade Commission should play a role in setting guardrails for the industry. Oh, really? An Illinois gunmaker rolled out a .22 rifle and a scaled-down AR-15 aimed for kids. The WE-1 tactical JR-15 has drawn criticisms from California Governor Gavin Newsom and fueled a new law prohibiting its marketing. You know, back in the day, kids in, say, for example, in the more free areas of the United States of America had a small .22 pistol called a Bearcat. And They walked around on their property and shot gophers. This is nothing new. This is nothing new. And oh, by the way, it's nobody's business whether or not I get my kid a 22 rifle. I got Colton a 22 rifle when he was 12. Has he shot anybody with it? No. As a matter of fact, he barely picks it up. Why? Well, because he's not into it. The mystery is, there's no mystery in it for him. He's gone hunting with me. Wilson, we've already talked about this one. Wilson Combat's $2,500 Urban Super Sniper, a model rifle so precise its .223 caliber rounds can hit within an inch at 100 yards. Good gosh in heaven. This is the ad that stuck with Representative Tom Malinowski, the Democrat from New Jersey, led him to introduce a bill that would direct the FTC to clamp down on gun ads. There's no legal scenario for an urban sniper rifle. Oh, yeah? An ad campaign from Remington's Bushmaster brand was tethered to Sandy Hook shooting and led to a $73 million settlement with Remington's insurers because the insurers settled the lawsuit. Remington had nothing to do with it. They should have fought it. That outcome is widely seen as opening the door to other legal challenges over the way gun manufacturers market their weapons. Consider your man card reissued. Once again, a Remington Bushmaster never, ever, ever committed a crime by itself. Ever. Daniel Defense, the maker of an AR-15 style rifle used in the Uvalde shooting, has become known in the industry for pushing the limit on gun advertising. The CEO pulled an ad featuring a child after the shooting, although he said it had a good message, which was, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. This is a little kid hanging out with his AR-15. The rifle, by the way, is almost the same size as the kid. They also had another one from Daniel Defense showing a soldier saying, use what they use. Smith & Wesson's ads have been criticized for appearing like popular first-person shooter games like Call of Duty. The company has been called before Congress, has been the subject of subpoena for its marketing practices. The company's CEO this week called it an unprecedented and unjustified attack. It absolutely is. Some now seek to prohibit firearms manufacturers and supporters of the Second Amendment from advertising in a manner designed to remind law-abiding citizens they have a constitutional right to bear arms in defense of themselves and their families, said Mark Smith, the president and CEO of Smith & Wesson. You know what's selling weapons in the United States? Lawlessness. You know what's selling weapons in the United States? Government officials doing their absolute dead level best to invalidate the Second Amendment. When the assault weapons ban, much ballyhooed by President Biden, was passed during the Clinton administration, I was caught flat-footed. When President Obama was elected, I went out and bought some weapons because I didn't want to get caught flat-footed again. The reason I bought those weapons is because President Obama was coming to power. That's why I bought them. Every time there is lawlessness or craziness perpetrated on the people of the United States, they take steps to solve the problem. Defund the police has sold more weapons than any of the ads the FTC is looking at with great consternation. It's ridiculous. This is a free society. This society has a provision in the Bill of Rights to make it possible for people to own weapons. Advertising those weapons is none of the government's business. None at all. What we are seeing is political vigilantism. What we're seeing the absolute abject ignorance of the reality that says this. They throw out all these advertisements for weapons used in school shootings. First of all, Why hasn't somebody created a secure enough school so that you don't have to worry about school shootings? That's problem number one. That's a political failure. Thing number two, you're in a position where these people are essentially saying that we should all be like the victims of these shootings. Unarmed before the wolf at the door. The cynicism is nearly unbearable, at least in my eyes. How about yours? Telephone number 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. Back with more in just a moment. This is The Wells Report. This is The Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri was killed in a drone strike. President Joe Biden stood before a lectern and told us the story about another arch terrorist meeting his demise. He was 71 years old. He was a visible international symbol of Al-Qaeda 11 years after the U.S. killed Osama bin Laden. The president said, "I authorized a precision strike that would remove him from the battlefield once and for all," and then took credit for being able to keep terrorism from taking hold in Afghanistan. Today, the death toll from yesterday's bombing at a mosque in Kabul, Afghanistan, is now reported at 21. No terror group yet claimed responsibility for the bombing at the country's capital, which struck during the evening prayer hour. Initial reports stated 10 people had been killed, roughly 21 injured. The Taliban now says at least 21 people were killed and 33 others wounded. The bombing also killed a prominent cleric, Mullah Amir Muhammad Kabuli, according to the Associated Press. Taliban police vowed that perpetrators of such crime will soon be brought to justice and will be punished. While no one has claimed responsibility, everyone is looking at ISIS. They've been ramping up similar attacks against the Taliban over the last year. The bombing comes days after the one-year anniversary of the Taliban's swift takeover of Afghanistan in 2021. And President Joe Biden ordered the U.S. military to withdraw from the country after 20 years of deployments there. While a majority of Americans supported the withdrawal, President Biden faced heavy criticism for his handling of the move. More than a dozen U.S. soldiers were killed in a bombing at the Kabul airport as they were securing it for evacuations. And speaking of Americans in Afghanistan, hundreds of Americans have been evacuated from Afghanistan. Thousands of Afghan allies remain since President Biden broke the promise which he made 1 year ago today to keep military boots on the ground until we get all the Americans out. On August 18th, 2021, 3 days after the Taliban seized the capital of Kabul and forced the U.S. Embassy there to evacuate, President Biden told ABC's George Stephanopoulos that intelligence did not indicate that a Taliban takeover was likely, despite numerous reports to the contrary. The president also said the U.S. military would stay in Afghanistan until all Americans and Afghan allies were evacuated. If there are any Americans left, we're going to stay until we get them all out, said Biden. Are you committed to make sure the troops stay until every American who wants out is out? Stephanopoulos asked. The president responded, yes. Stephanopoulos also asked whether the president's commitment held for Afghan allies. The commitment holds to get everyone out. In fact, we can get out and everyone should come out. And that's the objective. That's what we're doing now. That's the path we're on. And I think we'll get there. 8 days later, the U.S. military mass evacuation of Kabul on August 26, 2021, suicide bombers killed 183 people, including 13 U.S. service members. U.S. retaliated by launching 2 drone strikes against suspected ISIS-K terrorists, one of which ended up killing 10 Afghan civilians, including 7 children. As we come to this conversation at this particular moment, there are still Americans in Afghanistan. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken told members of the House Foreign Affairs Committee there were only 100 Americans left in Afghanistan who wanted to leave. The State Department confirmed to Politico this week that more than 800 American citizens and at least 600 legal permanent residents of the U.S. have been evacuated since the withdrawal. The State Department did not give a number when asked by Fox News how many Americans who want to leave and Afghans who have applied for special immigrant visas remain in Afghanistan. We continue to work with U.S. citizens who express a desire to depart Afghanistan and have the necessary travel documents to do so. The number fluctuates regularly as the U.S. citizens change their mind about leaving, or as some continue to return to Afghanistan for different reasons. So in other words, there are still Americans there. How many? State Department won't say. But they're working with everyone. But they can't tell you the number of people that they're working with. That's dereliction of duty. It was a savage mistake. A savage mistake that stranded Americans and U.S. permanent resident citizens, to sit there in Afghanistan and wait for their moment to leave. The other small rubric in all that was that there were a lot of former United States veterans that set up private flights to get Americans out. And then the State Department curtailed their ability to land in other countries. The State Department did that. So not only are there Americans and U.S. permanent residents still in Afghanistan. But when there was an opportunity to get some out, the State Department intervened and stopped them. This is not some partisan report. This is simple truth. Strange we don't hear the hue and cry about that. The people being charged with dereliction of duty are different people than the ones that actually committed it. And where is the press to force the issue? Nowhere to be seen. Thanks very much for watching this edition of the Wells Report. We'll see you again tomorrow. All right, my friend. God bless you. Take good care, and I will see you anon. Be safe. Make good decisions.